Okay, miss the rapture or make peace with God now. In one of my last videos called Rapture Day Normal Day, I said that Jesus likened anyone who was following him around but was not willing to put him first in their life, ahead of their father, mother, son, daughter, sister, brother, wife, yea, and their own life also. Then he said they cannot be his disciple, but they were like someone who was building a tower that can never be finished. And the reference is to the Tower of Babel, which was never finished. And he said that all who behold that failure of this tower builder will begin to mock them. And I believe that this could be a reference to when the rapture takes place, and the Christians, sometimes they've been referred to as Christians in name only, will immediately be exposed and mocked by the rest of the world who will behold them. Much like what happened to Elisha after Elijah was raptured, and immediately Elisha rends his garments, a symbol of repentance. And then Elisha, begins to be mocked by people who say, "Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head." You remember that in the Old Testament? In other words, it was as though they were saying, what happened? How come Elijah got to go up, but you didn't? And it's almost like they're, in the example of the tower builder, it would be like they're saying, what's the matter? Your tower didn't reach high enough? So I think that idea of being mocked for your tower not being able to be finished is like Jesus saying, when you get left behind, it's not going to go well for you, starting immediately, okay? If that is a rapture reference, which I think it is. So then Jesus goes on to talk about how not only are you like someone who's not able to finish this tower that you are building because you're not willing to let Jesus be Lord over you. And you know, you think about it, a lot of my Christian life growing up, the sermons I would hear were from preachers who were trying to convince us that we really should make Jesus Lord over us. It was almost expected and almost understood and almost sort of rationalized away that, well, most of us aren't really letting Jesus be Lord over us, but we believe in him and that's all you need for salvation anyway. So anything beyond that is more or less an elective, and it's not really, I don't think that's true. I think salvation requires Jesus to be Lord over you, and a relationship built upon trust, and a covenant relationship where you enter into a trusting relationship with him, and he gives beauty for ashes, where you give him your ashes, he gives you his life. But he says right here that if you don't forsake all and follow him, you can't be his disciple, you won't learn anything. And so these people were those who thought they could be Christians without giving all, and they found out it didn't work, and now they're being mocked, okay? So now I want to talk about what Jesus says next in the very next passage after the tower builder example. And it's in Luke 14, starting at verse 27. I'm just going to read this. "And whosoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you intending to build a tower sits not down first, and count the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king," see, I think building is you trying to make it into heaven by your own works, by your own, like the Tower of Babel, man building his own way to heaven. And Jesus said, if you're not willing to take the free gift of salvation by making me Lord over your life, then you're like someone trying to get in some other way. You're not going through the door, which is Jesus. So even though you say, well, I believe in Jesus, well, many believed in Jesus in his day. The Jews believed on him, but they would not confess him because they didn't want to be put out of the synagogue. They didn't want it to cost them anything. So there's that line you have to be willing to cross, to forsake all and follow him, take up your cross and follow him, whereas you actually die to yourself and be willing to do whatever he asks of you. You know that example where Jesus said he wanted to wash the disciples' feet? Everything was going fine till he came to Peter. As soon as he came to Peter, Peter says, well, you're not washing my feet. You know, I'm not gonna put you to humiliate you like that, Lord. I don't know what you're trying to prove here, but go on to the next guy. And Jesus could have just said, well, okay, Peter, if that's the way you feel about it. But he didn't. He said, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you have no part with me. So what does Peter do? He says, well, then wash my hands and my face and wash me all over. And Jesus said, I don't need to wash. Basically what Jesus was trying to say is, would you just let me be in charge for once, Peter? If you're not going to let me be in charge, we can't do this. And there's a lot of Christians who think they can have a relationship with Jesus without Jesus actually being in charge. And Jesus is saying, it doesn't work like that. There's no room for two thrones. There's only room for one throne, and it's his. And if you don't let him be Lord over you, at some point he's going to say, you have no part with me. And that's what ends up happening. And let's just keep reading this. Okay. So, less happily, after he has laid the foundations, not able to finish it, all who behold it begin to mock him. Because in essence, what you're doing, if you're not letting him be Lord over you, then you're like somebody who's saying, no, I got this. I can build my own way into heaven. I can climb over the wall. I'll get in some way. And it'll be fine, and it's not going to work. He's saying it's not going to work. So you should sit down and count the cost and see, can you, with your talents and your skills and your works, can you finish this goal you've set for yourself? Can you make it into heaven yourself? Okay. Then he goes on to another example where he says, or what king, this is verse 31 in that same section, or what king going to make war against another king, sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able with 10,000 to meet him that cometh against him with 20,000. So basically, the same guy that was building the tower is now being likened unto a king who has 10,000 men, and he's going to go fight against another king who has 20,000 men. And what I believe is happening here by the Holy Spirit is that person with 10,000 is the Christian who doesn't want to submit to God, doesn't want to submit to the Lordship of Jesus Christ, and without realizing, you're actually making war against God. And God is the one with 20,000. You're the one with 10,000. Can you, with your 10,000 men, beat God? Because it's the same thing. Not only are you not going to be able to build a tower high enough, but you're actually making war against God. Because what is it that you're not willing to give up? Friendship with the world. If you're asked by Jesus to become a disciple, you're not going to make it with the world. The world's going to be your enemy. And a lot of people don't want to make that commitment. They don't want to lose their friendship with the world. But friendship with the world is enmity with God. That's your choice every time. And the tests that God gives to us will always require that when we do what God asks from us, it's going to probably make us not popular with the world. Okay, so let's keep going here. So, he says, wouldn't you consult and decide whether you, with your 10,000, are able to meet him that comes against you with 20,000? Or else, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends an embassage and desires conditions of peace. So what he's saying is, think about it. Can you fight against God and win? No. Obviously, the answer is no. So while God is still not here yet, before the end of your life, before your deathbed, or before the rapture comes, make peace with God. That's what I believe the feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace is. You're ready to go out and meet him under conditions of peace when he comes because you haven't been disobeying him. You're not like Peter saying, no, you're not going to wash my feet, Lord. Then you have no part with me. Well, then wash me all over. No, it's not that I need to wash you all over. It's that I need you to let me do what I want to do. And if I say I want to wash your feet, you don't say, no, you're not going to wash me. You just let me. And Peter thought, well, then if washing my feet's going to make me a better disciple, then wash my hands and my head too. He said, no, I don't need to do that. I need you to let me do what I want to do and stop trying to second guess me and stop trying to think that you know better than me how to run this thing, okay? Can we just do that? So if you're not willing to let God be God, he doesn't come any other way. He's going to be Lord, or he's not going to be involved with you at all. So if you want to make peace with him, while he is still yet a long way off, make your peace with him. So, verse 33, so likewise, whoever he be of you that forsakes not all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. And then I wrote here, so Jesus is saying that if you're not ready to make him Lord over your life, then not only are you seeking to provide your own way to heaven and eternal life by not entering in at the door, Jesus, but climbing up over a wall like a thief and a robber, excluding yourself from his finished work for you. And therefore you will miss the rapture and begin to be mocked and mistreated by everyone who sees this after the rapture. And I make a reference here to what I said in one of my earlier videos when I was talking about the Rolling Stones CD, Steel Wheels, and how people are catching on to this. Noticing on YouTube, there are people that are aware more and more that a lot of lyrics to rock and roll songs over the years that seemed so random and meaningless at the time when we first heard them. I've been a fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer since high school, and when these records came out. I never knew what they were talking about, but as time went on and as the Holy Spirit opened my eyes to these things, I'm going to read just a couple lyrics from an Emerson, Lake and Palmer song called Carnival 9, and it's, I think, referring to the day when the tribulation is happening. and they talk about the sudden fear that when the tribulation starts. Something about cold and misty morning. I heard a warning born in the air about a raging power where no one had an hour to spare, where the seas have withered, silent children shivered in the cold, and the faces captured in the lenses of the jackals for gold, and I'll be there, I'll be there, I will be there. I think that's the Antichrist. Well, it goes on and it says this: suffering and silence, they've all been betrayed. They hurt them and they beat them in a terrible way. Praying for survival at the end of the day, there is no compassion for those who stay. And there's another line that says, walls that no man thought would fall, the altars of the just, crushed, dust in the wind. So at a time when it says, fear that rattles in men's ears and rears its hideous head, dread, death in the wind, there's going to be some kind of people that are mistreated by everyone. There's no compassion for them, for those who stay. I think that's talking about those who are left behind at the rapture. So not only will the world be against those who would not submit to Jesus, yet they considered themselves Christians, but they have also made themselves enemies with God by attempting friendship with the world. Jesus is saying that just like the tower cannot ever be complete, the Tower of Babel example, you cannot win a battle against God. Your arm's too short to box with God, as they say. Know you not that friendship with the world is enmity with God? So this same person who is attempting this tower is also a king with 10,000 men who is going out to make war against God who has 20,000. You cannot win. And Jesus is hoping that you will sit down now and see the end result of both of these examples is not good, so that you will cease from doing this and begin to submit to him and make peace with God while he is yet a long ways off, so that when he arrives, either at your death or at the rapture, you and he will be in a peaceful relationship, and he will know you as a friend and not as an enemy. Okay, now I'm getting to the point that I really want to show you how this is all illustrated in a movie. I'm going to ask you a question. I want to describe a movie to you, and I want to see if you can tell me, if you can guess what movie I'm describing. Okay, ready? A military officer, this is in a movie, okay? A military officer is stationed in a remote location far away from his home base of operations. His orders are to occupy his post until further instructions. But after a long time of being there, he begins to become friendly with the natives in that place, and slowly his loyalties shift away from his home base of command, and instead he has become like those that he is stationed among, until his home base of operations, when they finally do contact him again, they find that they must treat him like an enemy instead of like one of their own. Okay, what movie did I just describe? There's actually two. And I would even go so far as to add a third that's more recent. Because this is a theme. There's something going on with these movies. And it is a very subtle kind of wooing. That they don't want you to... I don't think men wrote these movies. I think there's some supernatural helpers that help come up with these movies. And I have reasons for that I don't want to go into. I'm just going to keep going right here. To keep me on track, I wrote down what I wanted to say, okay, so I can't get off track. Okay, so what movie is this? It's actually two, and I might even say 3 different movies have this as their theme, though the third and most recent one is slightly different, but close enough to be included in this discussion, and there maybe even be others out there, but these 3 will suffice to make my point here. Now, did you guess Dances with Wolves? You are correct. But you are also correct if you said Apocalypse Now. Remember that one? And the third one that I would include is more recent, and it's called Avatar. All 3 of these movies have the same basic theme, what I just described. I'm going to go back and describe it again so you can see what I think about these movies. A military officer is stationed in a remote location far away from his home base of operations. In Apocalypse Now, that was a character played by Marlon Brando. He was a colonel. It was the Vietnam War was the setting. In the second movie, the frontier days of the United States, the American frontier, is the setting, but it's the exact same scenario. And in the third setting, it's on another planet altogether, okay? After a long time being there, he begins to become friendly with the natives in that place until slowly his loyalties shift away from his home base of command, and instead he has become like those that he is stationed among until his home base of operations. When they do finally come to contact him again, they find that they must treat him like an enemy instead of like one of their own. Okay, all three of these movies have that happening in there. So, in the first movie, Apocalypse Now, which came out in 1979, and I have the movie right over there, and I looked at the cover, and I noticed that when I looked at the DVD to make sure I got the date right, I noticed it has a running time of 153 minutes, which, if you know anything about that number, 153, it's a very significant number, and I want to get a book that I have right over here. Just hang on a second. This book right here is called The Pattern and the Prophecy, and it's by James Harrison. If you want to know why that number 153 is significant, and it just seemed kind of cool that the running time on this thing, see if it'll focus. Come on, baby. It might not focus. Anyway, the running time on here, right there, is 153 minutes. Anyway, there's a whole chapter in this book about the significance of the number 153 and how 1/3 of all numbers in existence will Trinity factor back to 153. It's an amazing thing, and it means something, and it has to do with those that are going to be saved. Out of all mankind, God said he's going to save 1/3, 2/3 will be lost. And I believe that factors back to the fact that God lost 1/3 of his angels. 2/3 stayed with him, 1/3 took a hike. He's going to replace those angels with people that he knows he can trust with his whole kingdom. Now, let me move on. So, a running time of 153 minutes, I just found that kind of interesting. The interesting thing about this first movie, Apocalypse Now, is that we, as the viewing audience watching this story, are shown the story from the viewpoint of the home base of operations. If you've ever seen the movie, you'll remember how it opens. From that point of view, the roles of good and evil are clearly presented, and there is no controversy as to who is good and who is evil. What happens is the movie opens with a Lieutenant Willard, played by Martin Sheen, being sent by the top military brass in a secret meeting with orders to assassinate their own officer, Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, because this officer has gone renegade, and after repeated spaces to repent, he repented not. I just threw a little bit of Bible lingo in there. If I was to read the back of this, it looks like this. It takes place, it's set in the Vietnam War. It says, Francis Ford Coppola's stunning vision of man's heart of darkness revealed through the madness of the Vietnam War. Lieutenant William Martin Sheen receives orders to seek out a renegade military outpost led by the mysterious Colonel Kurtz, Marlon Brando. Willard's mission, terminate with extreme prejudice. In other words, they want him to assassinate him. One of the most powerful films of all time, Apocalypse Now was nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 2 for Best Sound and Best Cinematography. Okay, let's continue. So he's gone renegade. They gave him opportunities to come back, and he wouldn't. So they feel that they have no other option but to send this agent in with orders to terminate the colonel's command with extreme prejudice, quote unquote. In other words, assassinate him. We never even meet this Colonel Kurtz until the end of the movie. And I threw in here, I might mention in passing, there's a real U.S. colonel named Bo Greitz. You might have heard of him. And I've heard him say that he actually thinks he was the inspiration for the character in the movie. And I can't go into why. I've met the man. He autographed his book to me. You can look him up online. He's a Christian, wonderful man of God, and a patriot. And he thinks that this was too coincidental, that because when he became a Christian, he was no longer useful to these. Anyway, I can't go too far into that. But you might want to look that up. It's just something, another interesting tidbit that I could throw out there. So he wrote a book called Called to Serve by Lieutenant Colonel Bo Greitz, if you're interested in that. But the character's name is Colonel Kurtz, and played by Marlon Brando. And he goes bad, so they have to send this guy in to finish him off. So when we do finally meet up with this evil Colonel Kurtz in the movie, Apocalypse Now, he's every bit as evil as we were warned about, as demonstrated for us when he sets the severed head of one of the soldiers who helped the hero, Martin Sheen's character, make it to this distant location. He puts it in Sheen's unsuspecting lap at night while relaxing by a fire, and it's really gross. And I said the beheading is no accident that it's represented in this film in this manner. Clearly, this Colonel Kurtz has gone bad, and we are allowed to see him as such. Okay, but now let's move ahead a number of years to the next telling of this same basic story, Dances with Wolves. Okay, this came out several years later. And we notice a startling change of viewpoints and in the roles of who is now good and who is now evil. In spite of the setting of the American frontier, this movie, Dances with Wolves, is not really, for our purposes, not really about how the U.S. mistreated Native Americans. And if you think that, then please consider how in our third example, they set the same scenario on yet on another planet altogether. And the natives are blue aliens that a soldier becomes friendly with, and he fights alongside against his own former allies. So just for now, if we can see past the immediate setting, whether it's the Vietnam War or the American frontier days or a fictitious other planet, and focus on the bigger spiritual picture as relates to Jesus and our being stationed here by him, and you'll begin to see the subtle way that we are being manipulated to see good and evil become confused. Okay, that's the point I want to make here. And I think movies like this are doing a lot more than just entertaining us. If they can get under our thought processes and make us see a blurring of who's good and who's evil, okay? Let's talk about this. So, who's our commander-in-chief? Jesus has stationed us on this earth, and he's the home base of operations. He's far away from us for now. He's put us in a remote location, and he's told us to occupy till he comes again, right? Okay. Jesus, our commander-in-chief, who stationed us here as soldiers in warfare, and his command center is in heaven, and we are told by him to occupy here on earth until he comes again. Paul said, "No man that warreth entangleth himself with this life, that he may please him who has chosen him to be a soldier." So we're being conditioned by these popular entertaining movies to believe that it is okay and good to make friends with the natives among whom we temporarily dwell. But if we fall for this ploy and become friendly with the natives, we are in danger of making war against God, and God has no choice but to fight against us as a renegade soldier. So the subtle tactics that are being used in these movies, let's talk about Dances with Wolves right now. In Dances with Wolves, we see, as the viewing audience, we're now watching the same exact set of circumstances that were happening in Apocalypse Now, but from the opposite side of the story, from the other point of view. So we now have a military officer played by Kevin Costner, and it's in the frontier cowboys and Indians sort of days, or at least the American military versus the Indians. Kevin Costner is stationed in a remote location far from his home base of operations, now set in the American frontier. The natives are the American Indians that the officer becomes friendly with. He also becomes friendly with a wolf, who he actually dances with, so that they can call the movie that. And right here you have to ask this question. Remember when Jesus said, "I send you out into this world as sheep among" what kind of animal? We're sheep among wolves. Do you see how it works? And if you remember, if you didn't see it in my video about the steel wheels, the Rolling Stone steel wheels, they mention, "Let's go out dancing, let's bury the hatchet and wipe out the past." And the singing of that song is right after they missed the rapture. Those who missed the rapture, because the very first line in the Steel Wheel CD is "Fling you out into orbit." It's the song "Sad, Sad, Sad." Fling you out into orbit. No one's going to hear you shout for joy. But the fools aren't going to follow. You don't need the sleaze about. I have somebody making comments on one of my videos because I talked about the wise and foolish virgins. And he said, "That's not the church. That's not the rapture. You got it all wrong." And tell it to the Rolling Stones. Tell it to the spirit that caused them to write that song. I had another guy who's complete post-tribber. He doesn't believe that the rapture's going to be before. He's got a whole website. He's always asking, sending out emails and saying, "Direct people to my site to send this out to all your contacts." So I'll go ahead and mention him. His name is, his handle online is Steven San Diego, okay? And the way I got to meet him is because I'm also in the San Diego area. and we were both posting things on the Five Doves Letters site a number of years ago. And I've been going outside. I used to go there. I mean, I still go there to read the letters all the time, but I used to post pretty regularly. And he found out his name was Steven San Diego, so I told him I was also in this area, and we got together and we had a dinner. And I thought he was pre-tribber. All he did the whole time is try to convince me that I was wrong for being a pre-trib, believe that the rapture is before the tribulation can start. And he said he used to be pre-trib, but now he's post-trib. So I showed him all this reasons. I've got a ton of reasons why I'm pre-trib and why I still have a belief in that and a hope for that. And one of the very strong reasons is because whatever spirit is causing these people to make these movies and to write their songs, they believe in a pre-trib rapture. There are New Age websites that are already explaining where the Christians went. They don't maybe call them Christians, but they say people who don't have the right vibration, people who are not ready for the New World Order, people who are not ready for the New Age, or whatever it might be, who don't have the right vibration or something, are going to be taken away from this planet for a while for retraining or something. And when they get it right, then maybe they can come back and rejoin us. And I mean, they're already, why would the devil waste time explaining away something that's not going to happen? Okay, there is going to be a pre-trib rapture. It's very, very, very soon. And the Rolling Stones mentioned in the very first song on the Steel Wheels CD, fling you out into orbit. No one's going to hear you shout. Fools aren't going to follow. You don't need the sleaze about. Now you're sad, sad, sad. Sad, 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 sad. But you're going to be fine if you obey the new rules, which are the second song, Mixed Emotions, where he starts talking about button your lip, baby, button your coat. Let's go out dancing, go for the throat. Bury the hatchet, wipe out the past, make love together, stay on the path. And he's trying to get him to just play ball and dance with the New World Order, and you won't have to be afraid. You can, take this little mark, which they sing about later in the you could go look at my videos on the Steel Wheels thing. I do take a long time to get to my point, which is why I'm writing it down now, because I know some people, they won't keep following me if I take too long to get to my point. So it's on that. It took me I don't know how many videos to get through that whole Steel Wheels CD and show what every song is in order of the tribulation period. Every song on that album is about the tribulation period and what's going to happen. And it begins with the rapture, and then what happens to the Christians who are left behind. Okay, let's continue here. So, the same story that was told in the first movie is now showed from Kevin Costner's character's point of view. And he not only makes friends with the natives in that area, but he also dances with a wolf, okay? So that they can call him Dances with Wolves, so they can name the movie Dances with Wolves. But how's it going to be for Jesus if when he comes back, when the apocalypse is now, if his sheep are dancing with the wolves? That's the point, okay? So, I might also mention something while we're talking about wolves and making friends with wolves. Everybody's talking about this Mandela effect thing. I don't know. I haven't looked at it that closely. There's a couple examples that they say where it seems as though the Bible may have been changed. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's a big debate right now, and I don't want to get in the thick of it, so I'm not going to take a side either way. But I will say this. They are saying, those who believe that there's something did change because of CERN, basically, if you've never heard of this, supposedly CERN is messing with time, space, continuum in such a way that things we all remember one way are now appearing to be different than with the way we always knew they were. And it even goes into the very Bible itself. And one of the things that we supposedly all remember being as clear as day is that the prophecy about the millennium was that the lion would lie down with the lamb. Everybody knows that. There's posters and pictures and postcards and Christian, gifts and bookstores where they show a lion and a lamb lying down together as our hope for the millennium one day. Nobody has ever said the wolf will lie down with the lamb. But that's what it says now. If you open up to that passage, it doesn't say the lion and the lamb lie down together. It says the wolf will lie down with the lamb. So I just throw that in there. Do what you will with it. Other examples, the Bible supposedly, it no longer says no man puts new wine into old, it used to say wineskins, now it says bottles. And as far as my memory goes, I remember reading wineskins all my life. and I looked it up in every single gospel where Jesus talks on that. It says bottles now. It doesn't say wineskins anywhere. So I'm like, okay, something might be going on here. But that's all I'm going to say about that. I just thought I'd mention it because we're talking about dancing with wolves, and it says now the lamb is going to lie down with a wolf. So if somebody did change something, it's interesting that they would change it to a wolf. So this guy's going to dance with wolves so that they can call the movie Dances with Wolves. And subtly, they're trying to say that it's a good thing to dance with wolves, and it's a good thing to make friends with the natives among whom you're stationed. And that's now a good thing. Whereas in the first movie, it was clearly an evil thing. Now it's okay, and you're the hero if you make friends with the natives and if you dance with wolves. And the bad guys are the ones who are against wolves when they show up. Okay, so let's continue reading here. Okay. Is it an accident that they called these movies like when the apocalypse is now? How is it going to be if the ones Jesus sent here to occupy until he returns, if he finds them dancing with the wolves? In this movie, we do not even meet up with the representatives of the home base of operations, which is God, or Jesus, until the end of the movie. And when they do show up, they are now seen as the evil ones. Opposite in the first movie. The military who sent the guy in, they were supposedly the good guys, and the military officer who went renegade was the bad guy. Now they've reversed those roles in the later movies. And it gets even worse by the time you get to the Avatar movie. He's totally the hero for making friends with these blue people, the natives, and the blue people are the good guys, and the American military are just, there's nothing good about them. They're just greedy, selfish thugs who need to be destroyed. I mean, they're just bad guys all the way. So you could see a pattern here of good and evil being flipped. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And while we're on the subject of movies, I think I could mention a movie that kind of does something similar, but it's in an entirely different setting and in an entirely different way. It's this one right here called The Bride. It starred Sting and Jennifer Beals. Remember that movie? It came out in, well, let me just read this. 1985, rock star Sting as Dr. Frankenstein and Jennifer Beals as a woman called Ava. Kind of an interesting choice of name for her. The woman that he made originally for the monster, and then yet Sting falls in love with Jennifer Beals' character himself, and he wants her to be with him, but she says, you know, I don't want to be with you, you didn't make me. Well, he told her that he found her wandering in the woods one day, and he brought her home and nursed her to health, and it was all a lie. The fact is he created her, and she doesn't believe him, so he takes her up to the previously forbidden room, you know, that she wasn't allowed into, and he goes and unseals it and takes her up there and shows her that he's, as a matter of fact, I did. And he proves it by showing her the sealed off room where he created her, and she responds by suggesting that she could get a job and pay him back for making her, and that she should be free to pursue her own way. And again, that's kind of like a reference to the tower builder idea. The reason people don't want to submit to God is because they don't want to give up being in charge. Just the same reason Peter said, you're not washing my feet. It was that age-old need to not surrender your control over your own way. And, you know, Jesus said, look, if you don't surrender this to me, you and me are done. Well, then wash me all over. No, that doesn't solve the problem because you're still not surrendering to me. You're calling the shots. Most people don't. That's a scary thing to do. But it's also the most freeing thing you will ever do if you ever try it. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Taste and see that he's good. So here we have a movie called The Bride, which is totally about this exact same thing. The creation not wanting to submit to the Creator, and the Creator being played off like some selfish jerk. Okay? If you've never seen this movie, Sting plays just a total jerk. He thinks he can force this woman to be with him, which is not at all what God does. God gives us all a choice. If you don't want to be with him, you're free to go your own way. But the end of thereof are the ways of death. That he warns us. He's very, very kind in warning us, you're free to go. But all of my good, perfect gifts only come with me. If you want my good and perfect gifts, they come from me, and they're only to those who want them. And so, if you leave me, you're also leaving every good and perfect gift. If you listen to these guys who claim, and I believe them, Bill Weiss, 23 Minutes in Hell, Brian Melvin, A Land Unknown, his book. If you listen to them talk, you can find them on YouTube. They have pointed out, because what Bill Weiss, when I first heard him, it was hard to listen to. It was so awful. I didn't want it to be true. And I was like, please let this not be real. Please let this, it's just too horrible. And I had to ask God when I listened to this, and I could only take so much at a time. And it would just be in my thoughts all day long for the next, however long. And then I'd say, okay, I'm ready for a little bit more. But it was hard to listen to, hard to read his book. His book came out long after I first heard him on the internet, or sent away for his talk. Actually, I heard him first on that It's Supernatural program. And then, anyway, I got a hold of his whole testimony about how God took him to hell just out of the blue one night. And he spent 23 minutes, which it turns out is the number of death, 23. And then they made that movie, 23, So it's a significant number. But one of the things he describes is how there's no air to breathe. It's extremely hot. It's poisonous air. And what you try to breathe, you're super weak. There's no water. You're thirsty beyond imagination. And then there's these creatures that just torment you all the time. And there's no love. There's only hatred. There's no kindness. There's only cruelty. There's everything horrible is there. There's nothing good. And he's trying to describe this. And it's like, well, why does it have to be this bad? And the answer is because all those things that we're made to be part of come from God. And if you don't want God, you're saying no to everything that God has. Everything that he created us to be part of, you're saying no to. If you don't want him to be Lord over you, then you're automatically rejecting everything that he also gives. And that means you are open. It'd be like if somebody presented you with a beautiful home, a beautiful place to live, and you turned it down, and the only other place left for you then is the bad side of town where all the scary people live. They say, don't go over there after dark. I've been in places where they tell me, stay in your hotel room, don't go out after dark, because the kind of element that you'll encounter, keep your door locked, stay in at night, and you're just a fool if you, well, that's what you say. I'm pretty tough, I'll go out. Then you're asking for it, and so I could talk a lot more about hell if you're interested, because one of the other questions that I asked the Holy Spirit was, why does hell have to be so bad? I could understand if people reject God that they have to go to hell, they go to a bad place, they don't want to be around God, okay, they go to some place where God isn't. But why so bad? If you listen to these people describe it, it is so, they're in terror the entire time. They're just indescribable terror. Bill Weiss said he was a surfer when he was young, and he experienced a shark attack where somebody died, and he was that close. He could have been, and he said, not even close. The terror that you feel in a shark attack is not even close, can't even be compared with the constant state of terror that you are in this place, because you know that at any moment these things can come back and start tormenting you again, and they're merciless. They're absolutely merciless. Anyway, I asked God, why so bad? Why does hell have to be so bad? You want to know what he told me? And another thing I could bring up. People like to ask the question, why are these testimonies, they always depict demons as being in charge in hell. The demons are not being in torment. They're the ones dishing out the torment. Why is that fair? Aren't they? And I wondered the same thing. I thought, well, why should demons be having all this fun in hell? They enjoy tormenting people. They get off on it. They never tire of it. It's their job. They just think it's the funnest thing in the world to do these horrible, horrible, horrible things to people. And that doesn't seem to make any sense. They're the most evil creatures. Why should they be in this capacity, not being tormented themselves? And God answered that question for me. He also answered, why is hell so bad? Why couldn't you have just, and he also answers in Brian Melvin's book, why can't you just unmake these people? Some people believe that there is no actual literal hell, that if you die, if you're not with God, you just cease to be. And God answers that in his book. I'll let him answer that one for you if you're interested. He totally covers all of that really well. But God did answer these first two questions for me, and I'm going to tell you what he told me. First of all, why is hell so bad? And what he told me was, the only way I could make hell not be so bad is if I made heaven not so good. You got to think about that for a while. Because hell is directly proportionally bad, and it's different for every person. It's bad exactly proportional to how good you turned down. If you were a Christian who knew God, if you were somebody who, I'm not one who believes in once saved, always saved, Because God says, I set before you this day, life and death. You can choose every single day. Anyway, if you knew God and you knew the righteous way, and the Bible even says this, there's a lot worse punishment for those who knew what was right and did not do it than it was for someone who didn't know and didn't do it. So, and I still had trouble with that. I said, okay, I was trying to grasp it. If hell wasn't going to be so bad, then heaven couldn't be so good. I said, I'm having trouble understanding that. So he said, okay, I'm going to give you an analogy. And he said, imagine you went on a game show. And it was like, let's make a deal or something. You're going to choose between door number 1 and door number 2. Well, 50-50 chance, right? And let's say if you pick right, you could win $100. How much is your life going to change whether you get that right or not? It's not going to really make that big a difference because $100 ain't that much at risk. It's not that big of a deal. So exponentially, as you increase the stakes, the choice becomes that much more meaningful, whether you pick it right or not. But if you add to that two different beings, both claiming to be your friend, and it's up to you to decide who's telling the truth, and you're allowed to ask them both questions. But you still have to choose. And one is God, your creator, who loves you, who gave himself for you, who gave Jesus to die on the cross for you. And the Bible says, how shall he not also with him freely give you all things? Now that he's got him back, he rose from the dead, he conquered death for all of us, and he's got him back, and he ever lives, never to die again, ever lives to make intercession for us. How shall he not also with him also freely give us all things? But if you say, I don't believe you, and he's got this other character who says, God's not your friend. He's not trying to help you. He just wants to. He just wants you to be a slave. He just wants you to till the ground and be a slave and work the garden. And he's holding out on you. He doesn't want good things for you. You have to decide which one of those two is telling you the truth. So God says, if you pick door number 1, untold riches, everything you've ever wanted. The only thing is you have to believe me, and I'm going to test you, and you have to wait until eternity to get it. And I can't go into that in order to keep on track. I'm already kind of getting off track, but let me just at least keep answering this question. So he gives you a choice of these two doors, and God's telling you which one to pick. The devil's trying to tell you, no, God's holding it. You just pick door number 2. Pick door number 2. If you get this wrong, if $100 or something is all that's at stake, who cares? But let's say it's more money than you could ever spend in a lifetime. Millions and millions of dollars. I don't know if this is a true story or not, but you might have heard of this. It could be one of those tales that gets told and it's not really based on reality. It was supposedly a true story. But there was this couple that every week they'd buy a lottery ticket, and they'd play the same exact numbers that meant something to them. And every week they'd take turns whose turn it was to go after work and buy the lottery ticket. Well, it was the wife's turn, but she was tired. So she didn't go by the store and buy the lottery ticket. She just went home. The next time the numbers came up, it was their winning numbers. And the husband divorced her over it because they would have been bazillionaires. They won this huge amount. It was the numbers they always played faithfully every week. And this one time she just said, I'm just too tired. I'm not going to go by and get the stupid numbers. It's not going to win anyway. What difference does it make? So she didn't go. And the husband, he couldn't get over it. Every time he had to get up and go to work, he thought about all that money they would have had. And it would have changed their lives. When you miss out on something like that was right in your fingertips, it is not something you can get over. That's part of what makes hell so bad. It's knowing that you didn't have to go there. That's what makes the demons gloat over you. Now that brings me to my second point. Okay, the fact is, heaven is so good, it's indescribably good. And part of what makes hell so bad is knowing you could have had that. You were created to be there. You were meant to be there. Demons are not like that. There's not a demon in existence that wouldn't trade places with you right now, any one of you. Because you have something demons don't have. You have a soul. Okay? You have something that was designed and created by God for God, to be with God. Demons were not created by God to be with God. Demons were an illicit relationship. You can find this in the book of Enoch. Something that was never created by God to exist and never had a chance at heaven, ever. Nothing they could have ever done from the moment they were conceived. They were the product of fallen angels and human women. And they created from that union some kind of giants, some kind of creatures, some kind of half-breed, some kind of hybrid. And the whole earth became filled with them. And God brought the flood to wipe them out. And the book of Enoch says when they were wiped out, the spirits, because they were not mortal, the mortal part of them died, the physical mortal part, and their skeletons are everywhere. They've been covered up by the Smithsonian Institution, and they've been hiding them. And you can go look at Tom Horn and Steve Quayle and Ellie Marzulli and Trey Smith, and some plenty of videos out there that will show you the evidence for these giants, the proof that the Bible says there were giants in the earth in those days. It's real. And they're coming back. That's what all the movies are showing. Yeah, there's a movie out right now by Steven Spielberg about it. The giants are coming, okay? But anyway, these giants, when they died in the flood, their bodies died, but their spirits did not die, and a certain portion of them remained on this earth, and it says they shall be known henceforth as evil spirits in the land. And there's no culture on earth that does not recognize evil spirits. Especially the further you get away from modern scientific Western societies, they know all about evil spirits. They've dealt with them as time immemorial. But these evil spirits never had a chance at heaven, and God, in his justness, he pointed out to me that it wouldn't be fair to treat these creatures in the same way that he would treat those who did have a chance at heaven and turned it down. And that's what makes these demons so angry towards human beings. They look at us as the biggest idiots in the world if you had a chance to go to heaven and you turned it down. They would give anything to go to heaven. They can't. They'll never be invited. Have you ever seen the Frankenstein story? Do you know what happens in that movie? Have you ever considered what caused Mary Shelley to write that story? It's about a creature that was dead and living at the same time. Have you ever watched any movies? They're all showing this in the movies. I don't care if you're watching Pirates of the Caribbean, where they're under a curse and they're forever hungry and thirsty, but they take drink and it doesn't satisfy them. They can't have sex. They can't satisfy because they're the living dead. That's showing you this is real. Ever so many freaking movies about that subject. I don't have time to list them all. But these beings would give anything to have the chance to go to heaven that we treat so flippantly. And that makes them angry against us. And it's all they can do to take it out on you. If you're foolish enough to go to hell, then they will make sure that you pay for all of eternity, that you were foolish enough to end up in their charge. And God says, it's, that he calls them the tormentors. He says, to the tormentors, and that's about all I can say on that. I'm going to get back to this movie, The Bride. Okay. So Sting's going to prove to this girl that he actually made her. And she doesn't care. He proves it, and she says, well, I'll pay you back. I'll get a job, and I'll pay you whatever you think it's worth that you created me, because I don't want to submit to you. And so she wants to go and pursue her own way. And she wants to go find this creature that she was originally made for. Oh, I was going to mention, since we're on the subject of Frankenstein, in the Mary Shelley Frankenstein movie, if you ever saw the version, I got to mention this. This is why I brought it up in the first place. If you ever saw the one where Robert De Niro plays the Frankenstein, I mean, that movie has been made more than any other subject, probably second only to biblical themes. I mean, over the years, Hollywood just loves to keep making Frankenstein movies in one way or another, even comedies. One of the funniest movies ever made, Young Frankenstein. But that subject keeps coming up. But why? And Robert De Niro plays one of the most meaningful roles of a Frankenstein movie ever done. And in fact, it was called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And it's Robert De Niro. He's able to speak more eloquently in this film than in any other Frankenstein, probably with the exception of Young Frankenstein. But Robert De Niro, as the monster, seeks to be accepted once he's been reanimated and he's the living dead, and yet people do not accept him. And I believe he is that is illustrating what demons feel and go through. And so he's trying so hard to be acceptable by the living normal people, and they just can't. There's no way he's going to be acceptable. So he says, if I can't have your affection, I'll settle for your terror. And he sets out on a reign of terror that it's just so brilliantly done, because that's exactly how I think demons feel. That's all I'm going to say about that. I could talk too long about that. Example after example of actual things I've heard where if demons could make friends with you, they would. They just can't. There's no way. Okay? So if they can't have your affection, they'll settle for your terror, and that's what they're going to do. If you're dumb enough, foolish enough, I'm sorry, but don't go to hell. Don't give them that opportunity. Accept God's offer and go to heaven and make peace with God. That's what I'm saying about all this. Okay, apart from Sting, the creator's wishes, she wants to be with the monster that she was made for and not with her creator. So all through this, we are made to see the creator as a selfish villain for not allowing his creation to have her own way, and the original monster to have the woman made for him. The little circus dwarf is a type of the devil who encourages the monster, who represents you and I, to go after his dream of being with the girl, and nothing is more important than your dreams. We hear a lot of this kind of talk on popular reality TV shows about new stars being made of regular dreamers. So, and finally, I wanted to talk about one other movie. I probably shouldn't even bring this up, but I'll mention it. One of the most significant movies out there ever made on the subject of, allegories that you could see in movies is the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It came out in 1971, starred Gene Wilder, Peter Ostrom, the little boy, and Jack Albertson, his grandfather. By the way, the remake did not work with Johnny Depp. Totally didn't work. The allegory was destroyed. They didn't follow the same story at all. But in that original one, you can substitute the character of Willy Wonka as God. The Chocolate Factory is a type of heaven. And if you remember in the movie, the chocolate factory was sealed up and became off limits and was very mysterious. No one went in, no one came out, no one went on. No one knew what went on in there, except that they made really good candy. Finally, it was announced, to everybody's surprise and absolute delight, that Willy Wonka was going to open the chocolate factory. And the teacher in the classroom says, class dismissed, and all the kids are running out. And the little boy who came in and told him this says, no, it's only for 5 kids. And he says, oh, class not dismissed. He says, well, you have to buy Wonka bars. So they all, okay, class dismissed. Everybody, the whole world's buying Wonka bars, looking for 5 golden tickets, right? 5 is the number of grace. The only way into this place is through God's grace. So what's happening here? The kids who find these golden tickets are visited by a mysterious, sinister-looking guy, and he whispers in their ear. And he always seems to know who's going to get these tickets, as though it's somehow arranged, or he just is supernatural because he's always right there whispering in their ear. And until Charlie's turn, we don't know what he's whispering, but we find out that he's actually offering a large sum of money if they'll sell him a particular piece of candy that they're going to be given once they get inside this factory. The candy in question is called an everlasting gobstopper. It actually represents our eternal soul. The guy who's whispering in their ear is the devil. He's wanting you to sell your soul. He's wanting you to go to hell. He's wanting you to not get to go to heaven. And because we, I believe, are created to take the devil's place. We are the ones that are going to be doing the job that third of the angels were doing before they fell. God wants people he can trust, so he's not going to just make more angels and put them in those spots like he could have, because probably they'd go bad too. There's something about a third of a whole that I don't understand, but it's a magic number. 33 and a third. 33.333333. I talked about that in one of my other videos, and I talked about how David Flynn, way more brilliant than me, and he's no longer with us. He's in heaven enjoying himself now. He passed away a couple years ago. A few years. Time's going so fast. But he talked a lot about the meaning of these esoteric symbols and how 33 and a third was so significant. And it all has to do with the angels that fell, and how God's going to replace those angels with immortal humans mankind, created in his own image. And we have the opportunity to work with God, to learn to trust him, and he can learn to trust us and learn to know us, and says, or go the other way and he'll say, I never knew you. We've got to get to know him now, and to know him in spirit and in truth, to get to trust him by tasting and seeing that he's good now. So anyway, in this movie, these 5 kids, using the golden ticket that they found in their candy bar, and they get in, and he gives them each a piece of candy that when you eat it, it never goes away. It never shrinks. It never, you can suck on it forever, and it never goes away. It's a symbol of your eternal soul. You're going to live forever. The question is where. And so as he gives this to them, he makes them promise that they won't ever turn it over to that bad guy. What was his name in the movie? Oh, I've got the thing right here. This is Willy Wonka. That's the picture of the movie. Slugworth, I think, was his name. And they go through the whole thing, and you find out that each kid, they're being tested with various instructions that they all fail, including Charlie himself, the hero. Him and his grandfather steal fizzy lifting drinks, and when they drink this stuff, it makes them fly. And each kid in turn disobeyed some kind of rule, and it was their undoing. It was their destruction. And so they were eliminated one by one as they go through the chocolate factory in this tour that they're on. And Charlie is nearly eliminated with his grandfather by being chopped to bits by a fan at the top of this silo-like tower that they're flying up in, and there's bubbles going up. And at first they're having the time of their lives. They're floating. Hey, it's fun, Grandpa. And as they get to the top, they're about to be chopped by this blade. They're going to just fly right up into it. And they're trying to hold themselves, and there's nothing they could do until they discover that if you burp, you let some of the hot air out, you float back down to safety, which I think is a way of saying that if you're willing to humble yourself, even though we've all sinned, okay. So they get to the end of the movie, and because they're the last ones left, and Willy Wonka explains to them, you stole fizzy lifting drinks, the silo is filthy, we have to totally sterilize it again, you really caused us a lot of trouble, you're done, you've forfeit all gifts, you're out of here, so good day, be gone. Grandpa, who I think represents our flesh, he's angry. He just, we're going to get even. If Slugworth wants that candy, we'll give it to him if it's the last thing we do. And you have to also remember that Charlie comes from poverty. They're just barely making ends meet. And Grandpa was bedridden. He didn't. It was only this trip to the chocolate factory that got him out of his bed. That he thought he was there for life. He's never going to get out of that bed again. But he's somehow is healed, and they go in here and they have a great time until this happens. And then Grandpa wants to go find Mr. Slugworth and give him this piece of candy and get even with Willy Wonka, who's essentially God. That's what happens when we're tested if we go the wrong way. We see it as, how dare you? You're nothing but a crook. I'll get even with you if it's the last thing I do. Charlie, on the other hand, is willing to admit, you're right, we did steal fizzy lifting drinks. I don't deserve the lifetime supply of chocolate, so okay, here's your candy back. And he's not willing. He's not the kind of person who wants to take that piece of candy and get rich off of it with Mr. Slugworth. So he sets it up on the counter, on the desk where Willy Wonka is working, and ignoring them and just telling him, good day, you're done, get out of here. And he says, Mr. Wonka, and he drops that piece of candy up there. And it's my favorite part of the whole movie. Willy Wonka picks that piece of candy up and he says, so shines a good deed in a dark and weary world. And he turns around and he's smiling, and Charlie doesn't understand. He says, Charlie, you won. You won. And he says, don't you see, I had to know. I had to test you. And it turns out he's giving him the whole chocolate factory. And Charlie can't believe it. He's like, what? He says, I'm glad to hear you say that you find the chocolate factory the happiest, the most beautiful, wonderful place in the whole wide world, because I'm giving it to you. And he's like, I can't believe it. And he says, well, I couldn't give it to an adult because an adult will try to run it his own way. That's our flesh. I had to give it to a child because a child is teachable. And Jesus said, except you become as a little child, you won't even enter the kingdom. I don't know who wrote that movie. I mean, I do. I mean, it's right here. It's Roald Dahl, somebody... But I don't know if he knows what he wrote. if he does, hats off to him. It's brilliant. And like I said, the remake with Johnny Depp didn't work. They didn't show it. But if you look at this movie with that kind of insight into looking at it like an allegory, you'll see it in a whole different light. And I love to do that. God's always showing me stuff in movies. I could go on and on and on. But it's fun to see things in movies that at first glance you don't notice. But that was one of the things God showed me, or told me he would teach me things if I would submit myself to him all those years ago when I was approached by him, and he said, if you really want to know me, give me your life, give me your records, which was symbolized my whole future. Everything I ever wanted to be was my rock and roll music and records. And he said, give me that. And I said, that's my whole life. That's everything I ever want to be. And he said, yeah, funny how it works like that, isn't it? I give you beauty for ashes, but you got to give me your ashes. And only after I obeyed and gave him my life, symbolized by those records, did I begin to see what was really going on everywhere. And I've only barely scratched the surface when I talk about this stuff. But I just, I hope that helps to satisfy one more video. I really appreciate those of you who've been subscribing and following me. I know that in a lot of my videos, it's hard to follow me, and I think God told me he wanted me to do that. He was glad. I'm not a great speaker. I don't know how to make fancy videos at all, but this stuff's not for everybody, so I don't get a whole lot of hits. It's for those of you who, like me, are willing to look for that deeper meaning and a deeper and closer relationship with your Creator. I'm looking forward to a great eternity, and I hope you are too. I'm ready to exit this world. I think our exit could be sooner than later. Somebody, one of you out there, and I'm sorry I don't remember your... I'll say it wrong if I try to remember it, but you know who you are, told me about this channel, and it's called Informed Christians YouTube channel. If you haven't already, go check that dude out. He has got some awesome information about the constellations and how things appear to be fulfilling thousands years old prophecies right now, and that our exit could be very, very close. Okay? If not, keep looking up anyway. And thanks a lot for watching. I gotta just add one little thing. I forgot about how I wanted to mention that my other favorite scene, well, actually, from the time that Charlie puts the candy up there to the credits, that's all my favorite part of the movie. But I can't not include the fact that the movie ends with a rapture. Okay, they get in the thing called the Wonkavator, and they said, "You mean like an elevator?" And he says, "Oh no, an elevator only goes up and down, but a Wonkavator can go sideways and forward and backwards and goes all over the place. Any place in the whole chocolate factory, just by pushing any one of these buttons. There's buttons all over the thing." And he says, "And up to now, I've pushed them all except for one, that red one in the big fancy covered thing." And he says, "So go ahead, Charlie." So Charlie pushes it, and they go right up through the ceiling and bust out through the top of the thing, and they fly up above the world. And that's the rapture. And I just think that is so cool. And because Charlie passed his test. Okay? Thank you.